Hello and welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be revisiting some of my favorite filler episodes from Super Sentai. So I'll be going through each season that I've seen, which is Jetman to King-Ohger. I'll pick out one filler episode that I remember. I'll go over a brief plot synopsis, and then I'll describe how I felt about it after I rewatched, whether it's as good as I remembered or not. So yeah, without further ado, I'll be revisiting my favorite Super Sentai filler episodes. First is Jetman, episode 10, Cup Noodle, and the plot of this episode revolves around a classmate of Akko's who is obsessed with ramen, and he's visited by God Ramen, the god of all cup noodles, to create the ultimate ramen. But obviously God Ramen is just a virus called Noodle Dimension, and the ramen he makes anyone who eat it unable to wait more than a minute for something. And this is my favorite filler episode in all of Sentai. It's pretty much the definition of what a Sentai filler episode is. It's just so ridiculous. And Ramen Dimension is just a funny looking monster. Just the concept of the god of all cup noodles is just hilarious in concept, and I feel like it's only something that can be done in Sentai. And after watching it, I don't think it's a great episode. It's pretty generic, but it's pretty much the template for what a filler episode should be. And I've seen this episode more than any other episode in Sentai, so it's just one of my favorites. Next is Zyuranger, episode 46, presenting the Vicious Sentai. And the plot of this episode revolves around the public turning on the Zyurangers when a Dora monster called Dora Mirage impersonates them and causes havoc. And this is one of the best episodes of Zyuranger, as it's one of the only ones that doesn't have a filler child. And also the scenes of Dora Mirage impersonating the Zyurangers and beating up civilians is really funny. And also this episode doesn't have a mecha fight, which is a good change of pace. Usually they get really boring. And even though imposter stories are pretty common, I like this more than most because it doesn't deal with the imposter trying to cause a rift in the team. They try to affect the Zyurangers' reputation with the public, and that's just a really interesting concept. So I really like this episode, definitely the best of Zyuranger. Next is Dairanger, episode 33, An Idol's First Experience. And this episode follows Rin, who becomes a famous idol with the help of a mysterious producer, and the producer is actually a medium magician who plans to steal Rin's chi and use it to turn the public into Gorma slaves. However, through Rin's kindness, he betrays the Gorma. And it's just a very wholesome episode. An episode with a monster that's actually good is a pretty common trope, but this one is different where the villain is evil at the start of the episode, and then through the episode and interactions with Rin, he becomes a good guy. And it's just really wholesome. The song that Rin sings is very catchy, and the final scene on the beach is very melodramatic, but it's also very good. And it's just one of my favorite episodes in Dairanger. Next is Kakuranger, episode 7, the huge one. And the episode concerns the yokai Gakitsuki, who takes advantage of Sekai's eating obsession by entering his stomach and growing him large, forcing him to eat the whole city's food supply. I really liked this episode when I first watched it, but after rewatching it, I don't think it's as good, but still pretty funny. And I think the best part of the episode is seeing how all the weird ways the Kakurangers use their ninpo, like with Tsuruhime turning into a hamburger. And there's also a very funny joke where Sasuke pulls out his ninpo X-ray telescope triumphantly, and then immediately just looks at Tsuruhime's chest. And that joke kind of carried the whole episode for me, because there's also this thing about Sekai confessing his love to Tsuruhime that goes literally nowhere in the season, but is a filler episode, so I guess nothing's supposed to follow over, but it's still kind of a weird plot point. This is just a funny coincidence, but Gakitsuki's human form looks very similar to the Monsters of the Week from Kamen Rider Gav, where the mouth is on their chest, and that's all I could think about when I saw that, so that's just a funny coincidence. But overall, this is still a pretty funny episode. Next is Ohranger, episode 23, the final swimsuit. And in this episode, Jerry has to fight against the other Ohrangers when a machine beast brainwashes them and takes her O-brace. And this episode is pretty much exclusively on more fights, which is always great to see. And there are also some funny moments, like when Buckus Roth and Bulldog were looking at the swimsuit magazine, and Barracloze also has some funny lines. And there's also this ridiculous shot of Jury wielding a heavy machine gun, which is the defining image in this episode. It's just such a crazy shot. And overall, this is just a very entertaining episode, and probably the best from Ohranger. Next is Carranger, episode 44, the persistently wacky Gekiso chase. And in this episode, the Carrangers have to chase after Bozok's #1 mechanic after he steals Natsumi's legendary wrench. And this is a pretty generic Carranger episode. It's funny, and the Bozok monster has a great design, but also has some character moments for Natsumi as she loses her confidence in her mechanic skills after losing the wrench. And there's also a dramatic moment between Natsumi and Dragon Cruiser, which I feel can only work in Carranger. The car chase itself is well done and makes this more memorable, as all the action is in the cars and not on foot. So it's a good episode overall. Next is Megaranger, episode 29, I Want to Lose Weight, Miku's Dubious Diet. In order to lose weight, Miku tries the sketchy diet crepe, but this is all part of Pig Nejire's plan, as anyone who eats the diet crepe goes on a binge eating spree, eventually leading to a depletion of all food in the city. And this is a funny episode, if not a little repetitive, because there was a similar episode about the Pink Ranger worrying about her weight in Carranger. And to me, the best part in this episode is that Yusaku gets to do things, and he beats Pig Nejire by outsmarting him. And Pig Nejire is also a very good monster of the week, with a great design and personality. And there are also plenty of funny moments, like the Mega Rangers passing off who has to pay Pig Nejire's bill, and the Diet Crepe song is the defining moment of this episode, and it's just such a catchy and funny song. So this is one of the more memorable episodes of Mega Ranger, and probably my favorite in that season. Next is Gingaman, Chapter 20, The One-Man Battle. Ryoma must fight Budo's Shogun alone after he causes the rest of the Gingamen to fall asleep. And this is just a very solid episode, and probably the best in Gingaman. Like always, Bull Black is really cool, and he has a couple of good interactions with Ryoma. The Monster of the Week is also really cool, and has a great design. And there's also an awesome final fight that includes a fight on horseback. And this is just a great episode overall, and probably the best in Gingaman, in my opinion. Next is GoGoFive, Episode 16, The Thief and the Saima Egg. A thief from Daimon's past steals a precious Saima egg. Meanwhile, Pierre enlists the help of an unreliable Saima beast to retrieve it. The takeaway I get most out of this episode is how much I like Pierre, and he's definitely my favorite commander in all of Sentai. But other than that, the episode is just good enough, with the Monster of the Week mostly stealing the show, although Daimon's relationship with the thief is wholesome, albeit pretty strange. So it's a fine enough episode. Next is Timeranger, Case File 13, Battle Casino. Tatsuya infiltrates a Launders run fight club to rescue a client's husband from his gambling debt. And this is just a great episode. It feels very different from the others, with lots of out-of-suit action. And the ending part where the rest of the Time Rangers break in was also a great scene. And the Monster of the Week is also interesting, where he's like Sargane from Hurricaneger, where he's a tiny creature with a big artificial body. And overall, this is just one of the more memorable episodes of Time Ranger. Next is Gaoranger, Quest 12, which is the real one. While traveling to gather Gao souls for the Gao egg, the Gao Rangers are attacked by an org that can impersonate them. And this is the first episode where I don't think it's that great. It's pretty unremarkable, but I always do like imposter stories in Sentai. And Kyoryuger has a funny design, and there is a funny part where Kaku introduces the real Saya by saying who steps on the flower, only for the real Saya to also step on the flower, which feels like something out of a Kiba Ranger. But other than that, it's a pretty generic episode, and honestly not that great. Next is Hurricaneger, Scroll 34, The Mushroom and 100 Points. The Hurricanegers have to stop Windinu's plot of using a cram school to brainwash children, and this is just an alright episode. There were a couple of funny moments like the Monster of the Week simping over Windinu having a bunch of jobs to recruit for a cram school, and the Hurricanegers getting electrocuted once they get into the cram school. And also Windinu's relationship with this random filler character who is played by Blue Racer's actor, I think. Windinu also grows large, which is kind of funny, but at the same time it's mostly a hindrance because that means there are 2 mecha fights, and I already don't like mecha fights, and making 2 of them just makes it worse. And it's just an okay episode, but I remembered it being better. Next is Abaranger, Episode 9, Awaken, Abare Survivor. Ryoga has to help a depressed man while they are trapped in Avolian's alternate world. This episode is interesting and overall pretty good. The subject matter is especially interesting to me, as they would never show some of the imagery that they do in American children's TV, let alone allude to it. But I think the message is still pretty good, especially coming from the most hopeful person ever in Ryoga. And the funniest part of this episode is definitely when the guy fails to tie his noose right, and then Ryoga comes over and shows him how to do it inadvertently. It's pretty dark if you think about it, but it's used exclusively for laughs, and I still don't think they could even get away with this in Sentai today. But overall, I think it's a pretty good message, and it's a decent episode overall. Next is Dekaranger, Episode 37, Hard-Boiled License. In order to get his ToQger license, Hoji must solve a string of recent deaths and grapple with the fact that the culprit is his girlfriend's brother. And this is one of the best episodes of Sentai in general, and might honestly be the best episode in my opinion. It takes itself very seriously and isn't bogged down by the usual tokusatsu nonsense and comic relief. And it's just an interesting dilemma, as a murderer is killing people to save his sister, yet killing people is morally wrong. And the song that Hoji's girlfriend sings is also very good. And I'm glad they didn't try to shoehorn in a mecha fight. and there's little to no action in general in this episode, and it's just a great episode overall, even if I would probably prefer something more goofy. But this is a great showcase that tokusatsu can take itself seriously and still do well. Next is Magiranger, Stage 32, Dad's Words. The Magirangers have an hour to destroy Hades' beast mold after Kai's recklessness gets Makito infected. And this is a pretty good episode. I like that Walzard is the main villain in this episode, and it's always cool when that happens. The message of always supporting your team is cheesy, but it perfectly fits Makito as the anchor of the team. And the episode also touches on Makito's relationship with his father, and their father is almost never brought up between any of the siblings, so that's good. And overall, it's one of my favorite episodes in Magiranger. Next is Boukenger, Task 27, The Feng Shui Trap. Akashi is cursed with bad luck by a Jaryu with a precious that manipulates Feng Shui. This is one of the best episodes of Boukenger, and one of my favorite episodes of Sentai in general. It's just very funny seeing Akashi, who's a non-superstitious and usually calm and collected guy, have such misfortune and see his mental state degrade over the episode. It's pretty funny. And the funniest part for me is when the Boukengers do their roll call and then the back explosion sets Bouken Red's suit on fire. And it's just a very funny episode, and it's just one of my favorites in general. Next is Gekiranger, Lesson 29, Guda Guda Here Here Shopping. Ken and Retsu go to a Chinatown antique shop to retrieve the Holy Beast Blade and have to deal with the owner who has a grudge against Gekijuken. And this is just an okay episode. The parts where Retsu and Ken are good, but that only takes up around half the episode, while the other Gekarangers have a B-plot involving a random monster of the week. And the best part is when the owner makes Ken and Retsu hallucinate, and Retsu gets taken down by a panda. Other than that, it's a forgettable episode, honestly. And that kind of sucks because this is one of the filler episodes that I remember the most. And I know that there's other good ones, but this one always stuck in my mind, and it's honestly not that good. But at least Ken's plot was somewhat entertaining. Next is Go-Onger, Grand Prix 34, Devilish Woman. Saki asks Gunpei to drive her troublesome sister out of town, only for both of them to fall for her tricks. And this is just a very funny episode, and honestly a good message of not completely trusting people just because they're pretty, or in Saki's case, trusting a complete heel turn of a person. There are a lot of funny moments like Sosuke Red and Han sipping over Saki's sister, Hirubanki doing a couple of funny things like acting as a grill or being a hair dryer, and the ending is also funny when the Go-Ongers are trying to get their van back from the dealership after Saki's sister sells it away. And then the Go-On Wings decide not to help because lending money damages relationships. It's honestly a really great episode. Next is Shinkenger, Act 16, The Power of Kuroko. Ryunosuke, Chiaki, and Kotoha are asked to learn from the Kuroko, but their attempts at one-upping them only lead to more problems. This is an alright episode. The best part is that it fleshes out the world more by explaining what the Kurokos do besides help the Shinkengers. I think the main conflict of the episode is just resolved too quickly, like by the halfway part of the episode. And the second half of the episode just feels like a generic teamwork message, which I guess works, but still feels a bit wonky. And there's still some funny moments, and I like the Kurokos, but this episode is just good enough. Next is Gokaiger, Epic 36, Run Agri. When the Matrintas start capturing top athletes, Agri trains to break the 100-meter record in order to get captured and save the other athletes. And this is just an okay episode. Gokaiger has very few good filler episodes, so this is still one of the better ones. And there's a couple of good moments like Hyde pouring water on Agri every time he fails, and when Gosei Knight helps him run in the rock quarry. Other than that, it's pretty forgettable, honestly, and I don't really remember anything else from it, even though I saw it only a couple days ago. Next is Gokaiger, Episode 10, Card Game. Luca and Joe infiltrate a Zangyok demolition ship and gamble with the foot soldiers. And this is a great filler episode. There are lots of great moments, like the Zangyok foot soldiers being fooled by the Gokaiger's terrible disguises, Marvelous not being able to win a game of cards, and the montage of Luca cheating. It's not anything spectacular, but it's what a great filler episode is supposed to be, entertaining. And its simplicity is what makes it a great episode. Next is Go Busters, Mission 17. Its name is Go Buster Beat. The plot revolves around Enter intercepting a supply of Jin's Enertron, but honestly there really isn't any plot to this episode really. That's saying how good of an episode this is, and just how good the characters are in Go Busters. Ryuji and Jin have some good moments together. There's a signature Go Busters same time mecha fight and on the ground fight, and this is the episode where Jin says oh shit, which I guess it's okay to curse when it's in a different language. It's just a solid episode in general, and one of my favorites in all of Go Busters. Next is Kyoryuger, Brave 14, Oh No, Spirit Base. In this episode, Lucario finds the entrance to the Kyoryuger Spirit Base. This is an alright episode. The Spirit Base stuff feels more like a B-plot, with the episode focusing more on Amy and Gentle, which isn't that interesting, but it does make a connection between them and Lucario and Debo Kibishi this. And Lucario is funny as always, and Debo Kibishi this is a good monster of the week. And I feel like the episode would have been much better if it just focused on them rather than Amy and Gentle. There is a funny moment when the Kyoryugers do their roll call in the Spirit Base and have to tone it down so the back explosion doesn't blow them up. It's still a funny episode because Kyoryuger is a good season in general, but it's definitely not the best. Next is ToQger, Station 10, Tokachi dies at sunset. After Tokachi is hit by a Shadow Kaijin's attack, the ToQgers have to defeat it by sunset or he dies. And this is definitely the most disappointing episode in this whole video. It's not nearly as good as I remember, not even close, because it's a filler child episode with a generic message of believing in yourself, and even so it's a good message to have. But the stuff with Tokachi dying is really rushed, and there's pretty much no urgency to it. I just remember this episode feeling a lot different than it actually is both times I watched ToQger. And it's still fine, but it's still incredibly disappointing at how good I remembered it being, and it ends up just being a generic filler child episode. Next is Ninja, Shinobi 25. It's summer, beware of Dracula. Fuka is scouted to be in a new movie. Meanwhile, the other ninjas infiltrate the edition to catch the Western yokai Dracula. This is one of my favorite filler episodes in all of Sentai, and I'm definitely biased towards it, because it was one of the only episodes I liked during the first time I watched Ninja. Although I've definitely changed my tone on Ninja, and I think there's a lot more episodes that are good, but I digress. This isn't a great episode by any stretch, but it's very entertaining, and there's surprisingly an actual wholesome moment between Fuka and Takaharu, and there are of course funny moments like Nagi and Yakumo cross-dressing and Takaharu being an idiot and trying to barge in the front door, even though he's a ninja and can disguise himself or be stealthy. I don't know, but I guess their thing is not hiding. And even though it was pretty obvious that the actor was a red herring as Dracula, I still like the reveal that the producer was actually Dracula. It's still a very funny episode, and one of my personal favorites in all Sentai. Next is Zyuranger, episode 24, Revived Memory. Bangarang begins to revive the dead, including Yamato's mother. And this is just a really solid episode. As far as I can remember, it is the first time Yamato's backstory is truly unpacked. And this episode is pretty serious for the most part. I liked when Yamato got to be with his mom, though I felt it was way too short. And I don't really understand the meaning behind Bangarang's plan, but that's just nitpicking. Bangarang and Yamato's rivalry started for real in this episode, and that's one of the best parts of Zyuranger. This is just a good episode overall, and one of the best in Zyuranger, although not as good as I remember it being. Next is Kyoryuger, Space 14, Exciting, Space Dragon Palace Castle. The Kyurangers infiltrate the Space Dragon Palace to rescue prisoners of a dark matter governor. And this is another good episode. There are lots of funny parts like Shorampo misinterpreting Raptor and getting stupid ideas, Garu always pressing the wrong button, the governor falling in love with female Garu, and the ending where Balance opens the trap and goes 400 years older, although that doesn't change anything for him. I didn't really care about the part about Garu feeling insecure about his luck, but he was still good in this episode. Singer and Champ also aren't in this episode, although I think this is the part of the season where they leave the team for a bit. And overall, this is a pretty good episode. Next is Lupinranger vs. Patranger, number 27, Yes Man Dancing. A gangler with the power of suggestion forces Toma and Sakia to join a strange aerobics dojo, and this is slowly becoming my favorite filler episode now. It's just so bizarre, especially because the gangler makes Sakia and Toma do aerobics for no reason. Like, he literally could have just made them bring the bomb to the global police immediately. Making them do aerobics has like nothing to do with his overall plan. And Toma's just great in this episode. Like Akashi in the Feng Shui Trap, he's usually the voice of logic, so having him be on the receiving end of all these weird happenings was just a great choice. Also, the part where he has an irritation meter when hanging out with Sakia is also how I feel about whenever Sakia is on screen. Although admittedly, in this episode he's pretty funny. Another great part is during the mecha fight when Keiichiro asks Sakia to use his newfound martial arts abilities, only to find out that it was just aerobics. And this is just a hilarious episode, and the epitome of what a Sentai filler episode can be. And I feel like in due time this is going to be one of my favorite episodes of Sentai in general. Next is Ryusoldier, episode 13, The Prime Ministers of the Ryusol Tribe. The Prime Minister, who is secretly a member of the Ryusol Tribe, asks Bamba and Toa to destroy Minosaur, but only after it kills her. And this is a solid episode. I like that it fleshes out the world by showing that there are other members of the Ryusol Tribe out and about. It also brings an interesting dilemma. Since the Ryusol Tribe vastly outlives humans, the Prime Minister has gotten tired of watching her loved ones grow old without her, so she wants to die. From this comes a good lesson about not running away from your problems by dying. You live at the hand you were dealt. There's also another lesson about saying nice things to others, but that felt kind of clunky and honestly unnecessary. Other than that, it's just a solid episode for your soldier. Next is Kyoryuger, episode 34, Blue and Yellow Passion. After taking a shot for Tamatomo, Shigeru has to destroy Yodana's Jamin or die from the poison. This is a great episode and one of the best from Kyoryuger. Tamatomo and Shigeru's relationship is really wholesome. I like how their pool game at the beginning of the episode was foreshadowing at how they would destroy the Jamin at the end. And I'm just glad that this episode wasn't just Jiro saving them like it usually is. It's actually interesting where Jiro's shot in the pool game influenced the shot that they had to make to destroy the Jamin. I like that a lot more than him just solving all the other people's problems. There's also a subplot about Garza taking over King Express, but that just felt superfluous and was just there to give the other characters something to do, although it's still better than a normal mecha fight. Other than that, it's still a pretty good episode. Next is Zyuranger, number 18 Kai. Life is short, fall in love with full force. Romance World cripples the Zyurangers by forcing them to fall in love. And this is a very typical Zyuranger episode. Very goofy and funny. All the characters have something funny to do, and this is probably the only episode where Vroom is anything but boring. And he's really good in this episode. And there's especially a hilarious scene on the beach. And the Jetman Sentai gear is also probably one of the only ones that has any creativity behind it. And I wonder what someone who hasn't seen Jetman thinks of it. Romance World also has a couple of funny lines. And this is just a solid episode of Zyuranger. And the Jetman gear alone is enough to make it one of the best in Zyuranger. Next is Dawn Brothers, Dawn 42, Off-Putting Family. Sarhar enlists the help of the other Dawn Brothers to pretend to be a family in order to catch a con artist spiritualist. And this episode is great, and it means even more to me because this is the episode that truly saw the absurdity of Dawn Brothers to me, which is kind of crazy because this happened so late, but that's how it goes sometimes. As usual, the cast interactions are great. And the spiritualist was also really funny, with his best part being when he was sensing evil spirits around people, but when Jiro asked what was cursing him, he just ignored him because he thought he was annoying, which is how I feel about Jiro too. And then when he broke into the house at the end of the episode, and he saw all the crazy things that the characters do, it's hilarious. And it's probably even funnier if it's shown out of context. Also, the mecha fight was pretty good with the Hitotsuki doing the Gaoranger Hurricane. And really the only problem I have with this episode is that the Noto don't do anything. And I feel like it could have been even funnier if they were evolved. Even so, this is a hilarious episode and perfectly encapsulates the absurdity of Dawn Brothers. Next is King-Ohger, episode 32, Encounter Kyoryu, and episode 33, Shugo, King and Kyoryu. After the King-Ohgers are sent to Earth by Doug Dead, they have to help the Kyoryugers with the revival of Debos. And this is pretty much here by default because there really isn't any filler in King-Ohger besides this one. And even so, it does have an impact on the overall story, although considerably less than the other episodes, and can probably be classified as filler. As far as in-season crossovers go, it's definitely the best, although it's a pretty low bar to cross. But it does a good job of integrating the Kyoryugers and King-Ohger mythologies together, and pretty much the only problem is that Daigo and Uchi aren't there, but they show up in the movie. And Prince is definitely the worst thing to come out of this, but other than that, it's a good crossover, especially because the Kyoryugers are one of my favorite teams. Now I'm going to talk about Boukenger, although this is to be determined because Boukenger hasn't finished yet. There's still about 10 episodes left. But right now I would say it would be episode 37, which aired just a couple weeks ago. It's a fake Ranger episode, but it's well done in that it isn't drawn out at all. There are two really great fight scenes between imposter Chashiro and Taya, and between the real Chashiro and the spy lady. And it further explores Chashiro's backstory, although not as much as I hoped. Overall, it's a really good episode. It's probably my favorite episode of Boukenger so far, and it'll probably be my favorite once the season ends. Now I'm just going to say my 5 favorite episodes from this video. Number 5 would be Hardboiled License from Dekaranger. Number 4 would be The Feng Shui Trap from Boukenger. Number 3 would be Beware of Dracula from Ninja. Number 2 would be Cup Noodle from Jetman. Number 1 would be Yes Man Dancing from Lupinranger vs. Patranger. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. And this is just a lot of fun to make. Just some of these seasons, like with Gokaiger and Hurricaneger, I hadn't seen those in 4 years. So going back and seeing a couple of episodes from those seasons is just really nostalgic, even though I was 16 when I first saw them. And talking about being nostalgic about those times is kind of crazy. I like making this video a lot, so I'll probably end up doing another volume of it, maybe 3. Probably that's at most. But the next video will probably be ranking the Sentai teams. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Feedback is also appreciated. Have a great day.